Turning pictures into poetry sounds like magic, right? Building that kind of AI feature into an app usually involves a lot of code. But what if you could create an app that generates poems from images, all using FlutterFlow's Visual Builder and the Gemini API? I'm here with Patricia, who's going to show us how.
Let's build.
Let's build. Let's build. Let's build. Let's build. Let's build.
Hi Patricia, how are you?
I'm great, Stuart. Thank you so much for having me.
Patricia is part of our developer relations team. So tell us about SnapVerse.
Yeah, so I was invited to do a workshop at a few universities this month. A shout out to City Tech and Stevens Institute. And, while I was thinking about, okay, I want to try something fun, something I haven't done before, and landed on the idea of SnapVerse. So basically what SnapVerse is, you take a picture of anything or you can upload a picture and you'll get a poem generated by Gemini from the picture.
It's such a great idea. And we're thrilled that you're able to show us how you built it. So take us through it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. I'm so excited to show you all and build it together. I was actually surprised. It took me maybe about an hour to build with the help of, asking ChatGPT questions and stuff like that. So I'm really excited to share with you all what I learned. Maybe first things first, let's just jump into a demo of how it works. So I'm going to pull it up right here. So this is what it looks like on desktop, and I also have a test mode version. So maybe we'll do the test mode version first. So we're going to click get started. You start by uploading a picture. So I'll go into my gallery and let's see what pictures I got out there. I got a bunch of random pictures, but you know what? One that I really love is I have this screenshot here of our AI agent builder feature. So I'm going to just go ahead and generate a poem of that. And there's our poem about one of our newly released features, AI agent builder. So basically, I kind of want to break down the flow of the app and kind of like what the process is. So if I were to describe what happens with our app in 4 steps, basically, I would say first the user uploads an image, and then the image gets compressed and processed so we can pass it to Gemini. So we display our poem. So I'll be walking you through each of these 4 steps and as we build our app together. So let's talk about the first step. The user uploads an image. So to do that, we're going to need to build a UI for our user to upload the image. So let's jump into our builder and build that. So here I've created a brand new project. So we're going to start from scratch. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to add a button, and I'm just going to put that in the middle, and I'll put something like upload image. And then after that, I am going to drag an image widget right underneath, and that is where we'll display the image once it's been uploaded. And I always like to do a little padding, so I will put that here. So that is pretty much what we have here. And this will be a placeholder, so the default image right now is network, but instead we're going to be doing an uploaded file. And we'll set that in our next step. So if we go back here, now that we've created our UI, let's add an action to our button so we can save our image. So once that button is clicked, that's where we are going to want to save our picture. So back to FlutterFlow, I'm going to click on this button, click our action editor, and on tap, I am going to upload our image, upload saved media, and either camera or gallery. here, what I'm gonna do is resize it. Um, Maybe set like a max 1000 and 1000. And the reason I did this is I was really nervous about passing such a large image to Gemini. Because, nowadays our phones are such high quality, right? We take beautiful pictures. And I just didn't want that experience of, you're so excited to upload the selfie of yourself to get a poem. And then, you get oh, file size exceeded. Like, that's so annoying, right? Like,
That would be a horrible user
yeah.
experience. You're right.
Yes.
The other thing with this means that obviously we're able to send a lower sized image and get back our result way quicker because FlutterFlow has
Yeah.
done all of the resizing for us on the front end.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great point. And what I'm gonna do here is just name it something. So I'll just call it like uploaded image. So yeah, we have added our action. And then our next step here. So yes, zooming in on what we did, we set a max width and height to avoid oversized images, and we named it. And now we are ready to move on to our next step. Just to kind of close the loop a little bit. So what we did here, right? We uploaded our image and we named it. So now let me connect it to this UI here, where when I click on this image and what's going to be our uploaded file, I will save that as widget state, which is of our button, because our image was uploaded when we click the button. So we're going to find that uploaded local file here. So yeah, with that, I think we now have no more errors and we're ready to move on to our next step. Now, this is where we prepare our image so that we can make our call to Gemini. So one way to do this is by using something called a base 64 string. So a base 64 is a way to encode binary data into ASCII text. And so basically a really long string that represents the image. And so with that, so instead of passing in a whole image, we can just pass this really long string that represents the image. So here's an example of that. I uploaded a image of Flash and I got back base 64 encoding of it. This, to give you an idea, this is maybe 1/20th of the string that I got back. So this is just an example of what it looks like, but it's way longer. So yeah, a very long string that represents the image. And then that's what we're going to pass to Gemini. So to do this, we're going to write our own custom function. Depending on your familiarity with code, sometimes it can be a little intimidating or whatnot. I promise you, literally all I did was type into ChatGPT, please write me a function in Dart that takes a FlutterFlow image and converts it into a base 64 string. So you're going to see this here, but I did not write a single line of it. All of it was copy and paste. So also, when this goes out, I'm going to share this document with you that I've been working on today. And this is kind of a reference or cheat sheet to go along with this workshop. And basically, it's going to have all the things that you can copy and paste that I'm using here. So I'll share this with you all, once this is over so you can reference it. So you don't have to pause the video, and type it all yourself. But yeah, what we're going to do is create a custom action that's going to take our image and convert it to a base 64 string. So let's go ahead and do that and make a new action. And yeah, I'll call it, let's see, image to base 64 string. So the return value, we're going to want to return a string, right? And this string is going to be the the base64 string that represents image. And then for arguments, I'll put like uploaded image, and that's going to be our uploaded file. And yeah, I believe, right, both of these are not going to be null because we're only going to call this function once we've uploaded a file. And hopefully, our encoding, that's going to give us back our string. So let me set that. And yeah, with that, let me copy this to the editor. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to this cheat sheet and copy and paste this line right here. Okay, wow. So uploaded image in this case. And then we're also going to need to import this line right here, convert. So that's going to allow us to use the Dart provided function base64 encode. But yeah, with that, I'm going to go ahead and save my action. Stuart, is there anything like that you want to add or any questions or anything like that?
No, it's beautifully done, and we all
Okay.
love ourselves a good cheat sheet.
I appreciate it. Yeah, well, with that, I say we can go on to the next step. And now we're ready to make our call to Gemini with our image to get the poem. So first things first is we need to get our API key to access Gemini. So I'm gonna go ahead, go to aistudio.google.com, get an API key. I do have one created, but if not, click on get API key. You may need to create a new project in AI Studio or use an existing one. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy my API key over here. And so now that we have our API key, we are ready to define our API call. So I'm going to go over our API call tab, create an API call, and I'm going to call it Gemini poem from image. This is going to be a post request and the API URL. Oh, well, actually, the nice thing is you can see it right here in AI Studio. So first, let's go ahead in our app state variables and define our API key as an app state variable. So I'm going to call it API key. It's going to be a string, and it's going to be persisted. So that means when our user closes out of the app and then they come back to it, the information for the API key is still going to be there. And that's what we want because the API key is going to allow you to make the calls to Gemini. And, we want to be able to do that when a user comes back to the app. So I'm going to click on that. And then this is also going to allow us to click on this field right here, secure persistent field. So I'm just going to put our API key over there. All right. There we go. Cool. All right. So with our API key in hand, we are now ready to define our API call. So let's go back to the FlutterFlow editor and our call to Gemini. So before we set it up here in API calls, what I did is I went into our app state and set our API key as an app state variable. I set it to be persisted. So this is going to allow us, like, even if a user closes out of the app, when they come back, our API key is still there so we can make our calls to Gemini. And we're also going to secure that field. So this is going to have it be encrypted since it is sensitive information. So now with that, let's go ahead and define our API call. So I'm going to create an API call. I'll call it like Gemini get poem from image. I am going to make it a post request. And the endpoint you can find in our cheat sheet. This is what we are going to pass in. For headers, we are going to be passing in JSON, content type, application/JSON. And let's set up our first variable, which is going to be our API key. This is of type string, and our default value is going to be, well, we don't need to set one up for now, but in our head, we will know that our default value is going to be the API key that is set as our app state. So let's talk about what other variables we'll want to set. So what we're going to be doing here is passing in our image and saying, hey, Gemini, from this image, please give me a poem. So let's add those two variables into our API call. Our image string, which is the base64 encoded, and our prompt. So let's do that here. We have our base64 string, which is a string, and then we have our prompts. And our body, I'm going to do JSON, and we're basically, let's see the prompt. Oh, we have prompt type string. So the body, we have these three variables over here, and we are going to pass this into our request. So how do we do that? Well, you can look into the documentation for Gemini on how do we, what's the format that they want it. Again, to be completely honest with you, what I did is I asked ChatGPT, and here's what I got. So this is also in our cheat sheet, so feel free to copy and paste this into our project. And so we have our base64 string, that is our variable name, and then we have our prompt. All right, cool. And with that, I am going to add our call. Let's see if we have any errors. Cool, we got no errors. So let's move on to the next step. Let's test our API calls, before we hook up any UI to it, just as a sanity check to make sure it works. So I'm going to click on response and test. And here we're going to pass in some values just to test it out. So for our API key, I'm going to copy my own API key from AI Studio. For the base64 string, earlier I had asked ChatGPT to generate a base64 string of a very basic image for me. It is also on our low cheat sheet, so I'm going to copy and paste that in. And then for the prompt, you can really write anything you want. This is what I had written before. Write a poem about this image, no commentary, and make it a haiku. So with that, let's test it out and see what we get. So, okay, cool. So this is what you'll see if it went right, which it did. And we got pink square, green bleeds, black dot, hold the side here. So we got a little poem. Yeah, so now let's go ahead and display it. So man, if you're following along, I'm so proud of you, because look at that. The 4 steps, we are now on step 3. We tested it and it works. This is our poem. Oh yes. So now that we have our poem, let's save it so that we can easily access it later. So I'm going to go into back into our ACall. The thing that's really cool about this is there's so much information that the API returns, but really all we care about is this one thing here, right? But we can see it, like how many tokens did we use, all of that. And here's a visual way where all the parts of the response is broken down. We care about this part right here, which is our poem. So what I'm going to do is click Add JSON Path, and I'm going to name this poem. So that way we can access it easily later. We don't got to worry about the $sign, right? And bracket part, dot text, we're just going to call it poem. So this is going to help us later. And yeah, I'm going to click save, and we're ready to move on. What's going to be involved in tying everything together? First, we're going to update our UI. So we already had the button to upload an image. Now we're going to add a button that generates our poem. And we're going to add a text widget underneath that's going to display our poem. So let's go ahead and do that. So back into our editor, I'm going to add a button down here, again with a little bit of padding, and I'm going to write this as generate poem. And then right under that, I'm going to include a text widget. And then here I'm going to call it maybe like poem displayed here, something like that. So, all right, now we've updated our UI. The next step is, so the poem, right now it says poem displayed here. That value is going to change based on our variable, right, of the poem that gets returned from our API. So let's create some page state variables. And what this is going to do is it's whenever that page state variable is updated, that's what's going to be displayed. So I'm going to make 2 page state variables here. One of them is our image base64. So this is that string that represents the image. I'm going to save that, just so we can access it easily. And then I'm also going to have our poem so we can display it in our UI when it's ready. So I'm going to go ahead here, click on page state variables. So I'm going to add our base64 image of type string. And then I'm also going to add our poem, and that is also type string. And note, for both of these, I'm making it nullable because at the beginning, they're not going to have any values, and that's okay. So I'm going to hit confirm. And now let's revisit our action chain and tie everything together. So to revisit what we had before, when we clicked on that upload image button, we just had one action, which was store media for upload. And now we're going to add 2 more. We're going to add our custom action that we wrote that converts our image into a string. And then we're going to update our page state, our base64 image. So to look into that closer, our custom action, we already defined it. So all we have to do is connect it. And then, so yeah, how do we do that? We are going to access our uploaded local file, which came from our button. So let's go into our editor and see what that looks like. So I'm clicking on this button here. Right now, we have 2 errors. We are going, oh, my bad. In my mind, I said we're going to set them as nullable, but I didn't actually click on them. So let's make this nullable and make this nullable. Cool. So back to our action over here. Here, we are going to do a custom action. We are image to base64 string, and this takes in a parameter. Our parameter is going to be the uploaded file that we uploaded by pressing on that button. So that right here. And I'm just going to call this, I'll call it base64 string from image. So our next step, we had defined a page state variable earlier. That's in state management, page state. So we have our base64 image, and now we can set it to the output of this action, which we named earlier. So action output, base64 string for image. And we are done there. We're going to revisit that third step, which is making our call to Gemini, right? We defined our API call, and now it's time to connect that API call to the button. So here's a brief overview of what that's going to look like. We have an API call. I'm just going to go over step by step what that's going to look like. The API call, remember, we took in 2 variables, right? Our well, actually, no, we took in 3, our API key, and then our base64 image and our prompt. So image base64, that is our page state variable that we set earlier. So we're going to access that. And then we're going to put in a prompt. With that, you can go crazy. You can do whatever prompt you want to put in there. And then if that succeeds, we want to update our page state variable to be our output from the API call. So let's go ahead and do that. And then we can see later our thoughtfulness about setting the JSON path is going to pay off too, but we'll look into that later. So here, the action starts with this button right here, generate poem. So I am going to set an API call. And the API call we have is Gemini get poem from image. So let's pass in our variables. So our API key, that's going to come from our app state variable that we set earlier. Our base64 string, that is going to come from our page state variable that we set. And then our prompt. And I might say something like, give me a poem inspired by this image. Don't give me an intro, just give me the poem. And the reason I write that is sometimes, using LLMs, you'll send your prompt and then they'll be like, sure, I'm excited to give you a poem. We don't need that. So that's why I put that there. But you're welcome to write whatever prompt that you like. And I'm going to name it just so it's easier for us to access later. So yeah, maybe I'll just call it API result. So from there, I am going to update our page state variable. We're going to go to page state. This time we want to update our poem, set value, and we're going to set it to the output of our API call. So action outputs, our API call right here. But remember how our API call returns a whole JSON thing, right? But we only want the poem part of that. So the nice thing is, it comes back as a JSON body, and we can use a predefined path, which would be our poem. So I'm going to select that. All right. So there we go. Now we have saved our poem. So really, let's talk about what do we need to do next. Now, remember this text right here? Now we want to connect it to the value of our poem. So right here, where it says text, I'm going to click on the orange dots and connect it to the page state value. All right, let's put a default value, poem. I'll just call it poem. All right. So with that, let's run this in test mode and see if it works. This is our moment of truth. I'm going to spin it up. We're going to see what happens. So here's what we have. Right now, we don't have a source image. We can go back and fix that later, but let's test this out. I'm going to go to upload image, our gallery, and okay, I'm actually going to see if we got any pictures. Oh, I got a bunch of pictures of my roommate. Okay, that's that's a picture of me. So I guess I'll upload that. Let's generate the poem. And there we go. We did it.
So because obviously when we open the app, it doesn't have any values. So it's giving us a couple of little errors there. But we can use some conditional formatting on those and get rid of those pretty easily.
For sure. If you want, should we go ahead and fix the conditional errors real quick?
Let's show people how they can do that.
Yeah, let's do it. So first things first, we uploaded, so this right here, right, our image, we probably don't need to show anything until they actually upload an image, right? So for visibility, I'm going to go to conditional. And I guess here I'm doing, my logic is a little bit like this, right? We have our page state variable. which is the base64 image. And that's not going to get set if the image isn't sent. So I'm kind of using this as a proxy. So my condition is going to be if our base64 image string is set and not empty, then I'm going to display the image. And same thing, we also don't need to see the generate poem button until that image shows up. So I'm going to set the same condition over here. Is set and not empty. There we go. Yeah, so maybe we can try it again. Let it do its thing. And okay, you know what? I had not thought to do that for the poem. Maybe we can do that for the poem as well, right? Like, yeah, it makes sense. We don't need to show a poem until we have something. So I can actually do this maybe also for the poem is set and not empty. But yes, going into our gallery. Okay, what is another picture I can pull? I have all these screenshots. You know what? I think this is a FlutterFlow shirt. So let's generate a poem. There we go. And one more thing I realized, just like, little UI things, this column right here, that contains our button and image and text, we are going to want to make that scrollable. So that way, if the poem is really long and, if the phone is small or if the text is set to really big, then they can still scroll and read the entire thing. Yeah, and then while we did that, change the poem, and then back to our poem. We're setting it to a space. Okay. There we go. I love it. Yeah. Okay. One final one for good measure. What is... Oh, you know what? This was me and some members of our team during an offsite. So yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Stuart.
For coming and showing us how you've built this amazing app.
My absolute pleasure.
And so quickly. You'll find all the resources for this app and the cheat sheet in Knack and in the description below. We can't wait to see what you're going to create with multimodal LLMs and multimodal AI.
Exactly. Yes. I can't wait to see what you built. And one thing I want to add to that, Stuart, is I feel like this really is just a template, right? Where, this is upload an image, get a poem. But all you need to do is change that prompt, and that opens up a whole world of possibilities, right? Like,
we're not demonstrating this so people can create poetry necessarily.
Yeah.
It's just a template to show people how they can use this to create, to turn an image into literally anything.
Exactly. Yeah. And I was at a hackathon a few months ago and just saw some amazing creations. But, let's say if you're passionate about sustainability, right? Taking a picture of, I don't know, a scenery and, analyzing it like, oh, what do the smog look like today, right? Or, yeah.
The options are, limitless when it comes to what AI can return. And we've got these incredible tools now, that are at our disposal. So tools like FlutterFlow allow us to, really tap into those super quickly, and we can spin something up to demonstrate an idea we've got in our heads so quickly now. Thanks, Patricia. Lovely to chat with you.
You're the best, Stuart.
Always.
Thank you so much for having me.
I do. Let's build. Let's build.